Welcome back. Today we're doing the animation editor inside of Houdini in our third lesson on animation. Now this allows us to change interpolations, loop animations and stuff like that. So I'm going to drop down a sphere, or actually let's do a test head. I love a good test head. Let's do pick head and let's have him bounce up and down. I'm alt clicking when I keyframe, if you haven't watched the other tutorials. But I'm going to turn off the grid and he's going to just do this at the moment. And I'm just playing at maximum speed without real-time toggle on, just because we aren't too bothered about how nice the animation looks. So opening the animation editor, how do we do it? So there's two main ways to open it. You go up to the window tab and you can click on animation editor. The shortcut is Alt-Shift-F, and it will open up your animation editor. It looks very daunting, but it's simple. It's nice and easy, trust me. And it gives you all of your channels here, even the ones that aren't keyframed. And the way that we remedy this is by clicking V, making sure that your mouse is over the parameters, and it will only open the keyframed channels instead of all the transform options, which is nice. And to move around, all we got to do is we middle click to move around. We can use this up here to scale as well. It's just like the bar down here next to the timeline. And then we can right click and drag to scale stuff. And then we can center these as well by clicking H or G. So we can also click J, which will show us the entire timeline and our keyframes. And I believe, yeah, wait a second, let me scale in. Yeah, it also centers it vertically. And if we want this to happen manually, we can go up here and click vertical adapt and horizontal adapt. And now anything that we do, so if I just keyframe something there, if I click on transform X, so we only get the animation values for transform X, we'll get it centered. And if we click on translate Y, it will center again. So this does it manually for us. I'm just going to turn these off though. So now we're going to move down to the options at the bottom. So if I do Control A, we're going to select all our keyframes here, and we'll get every option possible. Currently we've got the frame value as --, which is not very useful, but that's because all of these are different frames. So if I go and middle click and drag up, so we go by 1, you can move all of these at once. It also allows you to do this in like increments of like 0.1 and 0.2, but if you didn't mean to do this, you can always go up here and select snap keyframes. We can just scroll up and it will just snap, but if we have this off, then it will actually give us integers. Float values on our frames instead of integers. And also I've got to mention, if you select a keyframe and click F, this is essentially what G did over here. So if you have something selected, it will center it. Now this will center whatever frame you have. So if I click F now, it'll center it. So let's go through the rest of the options now. We've got a value, and now value is just essentially going to drag up and down these values here. We can do it per keyframe. And then we have slope. So this is only going to work on the on certain interpolations like Bezier. Let's enlarge this. In fact, no, I like it like that. Let's have it like this. So essentially, slope will only be available on certain interpolations, including Bezier, which is the default interpolation. And what this will do is it will change the slope of your animation keyframe. And this will only work if you've got the handle or the handle selected. So you've got to have the handle selected. You can't select the keyframe or the acceleration pool thing. And that's what we have next, which is acceleration. Now this is just going to change the acceleration of your keyframe, make it more dramatic, you know, a little bit more easing in there. And you can select everything and do it for everything. Unfortunately, it will only pull one direction, and I'll show you how to fix that in a second. And then finally we have the interpolation. Now there's a bunch of different interpolations here, but the main ones that I use on a day-to-day basis are a constant linear, and Bezier. So constant is going to snap to the next keyframe. It's not going to interpolate any other motion in between your two keyframes. So if I turn this on, it's going to snap to each position like that. And then if we do linear, we're just going to get a linear move. So there's not going to be any interpolation like acceleration or anything like that. It's just going to be, you know, he's having a little ribbit up and down like a frog. And then Bezier is the smooth one, or the one that we can make smooth. We can kind of crash animations into a keyframe and smooth them out going away and all that sort of stuff. And there's a bunch of other ones as well that I'm not going to explain today, but they're also quite useful. And if you just want like a kind of unique looking animation. Now I'm going to talk about doing all this stuff visually. So what I mean by that is like going up here and pulling stuff and whatnot. So we can pull our acceleration on our handle. So if I do control and drag, it will not let me move this up and down and change the slope. It will only let me change the acceleration, which is useful. And again, I mentioned earlier I was going to talk about keep acceleration ratio. And when we have this selected, it's going to copy our acceleration on this handle to this one, and this can save quite a bit of time. I think they should be on by default, but whatever. And then changing the value of these, by default, if I drag this keyframe up and down, it's not going to let me drag side to side, it's only going to let me change the value. And then if I want to move this, move the frame value, we click this line here going through it. And you can do this on everything. So if I wanted to do Command or Control A and drag this, we can change our keyframe value or change our frame position. And the slope we can obviously do by dragging up and down like so. Next we have scaling keyframes. So if you have a bunch of keyframes selected, or two or whatever, you can go and click box handle and it will enable this sort of scaling option. And we can scale within a little bounding box, which is very nice. And the benefit of doing this over doing it in timeline is that we can actually put this in reverse. So I can drag this all the way down and make it go negative. I forgot to mention, but you can also freehand drag this stuff around. So you can do control and then drag. So if you just want a really rough animation, you can drag that around. And then we also have, you can alt click in a position and it will create a keyframe on your wire. And I recommend turning this on snap move keyframes to the nearest frame at all times. Just have this on, because if you're dragging these back and forward, if you have this off, it's going to go in steps of 0.1, which is not very useful for most cases unless you're using sub steps. And next up we have snapshots, and essentially what this does is if I drag this down, we're going to see this ghosting line, the ghost of animations past, and we can go up here and swap the active channels on our snapshot. And this will go back to our original position, which is really useful. So if you've done, you know, a bunch of changes over wherever in your scene and you can't undo, then you just go and switch the active channels, and you can also clear the channel snapshots as well if you want. But leaving it on doesn't really change anything, so I don't know why you would. And finally, we have the channel editor. Now this is extremely buggy in 17, Houdini 17. I don't know if it's just the two versions that I've tried, but whenever I use this, if I've like done a bunch of stuff in a scene, it's just going to break. But essentially the channel editor, so if I select everything, turn this box thing off, we go over here and then we do selected channel properties. And it didn't crash, thankfully. The shortcut is Alt-E. So before you do this, save. It might have been fixed in the newer versions. I'm on a bit of an older version now, but yeah, just bear that in mind. So essentially, what this does is I'm going to get some more channels in here. So let's select some more channels and then Alt-E. And then what we have here is we can extend our animation. We can do a bunch of other stuff, but essentially you've got to drag over these two, or drag over a bunch of them. you can hold shift and select multiple columns, and then change these to like cycle, for example. So cycle is just going to loop over and over again. The bad thing about cycle is that if your keyframe, your last keyframe doesn't end exactly where your first keyframe ended, it's going to go whoop, it's going to go all the way down. And the way you fix this is you can go and do cycle offset and apply, and it's going to keep going up and up and up, which is really cool. And then we have oscillate as well, which kind of does what it says on a tin. Oscillate, which is going to do exactly what you think it would. It's going to go in between these values, and this actually exists, this animation exists, like it's not just like a little trace. Another really useful one, the one that I probably use the most, is extend, because then I can sort of, normally I'll use it to sort of place a keyframe, but it's a quick and dirty way of essentially, if you want your animation to, your main animation to happen, and then you just want the ending to sort of slowly keep going, then you can move the slope and it should continue down. I don't know why it's not going. Is it extend or slope? Oh yeah, slope, my bad, sorry. Extend just makes sense to me though. But yeah, slope essentially will take whatever your interpolation is at the end and keep it going. So let's see what that does. He's just gonna go down very slowly forever now. And that's what that does. I use this all the time. And I didn't even mention, but before and after essentially just means that if I was to get rid of this before and put this on extend, which is the default, it's not going to take into consideration the slope, but over here it will. That's all it does. So yeah, I hope this tutorial was useful. If you guys have any questions, drop them in the comments and I'll try and get back to you. Bye.